When camping in the deep mountains, can the protagonist, who is being tracked by a mysterious person, escape? Who exactly is that mysterious person? What is his purpose? Stay tuned for thrilling stories. Subscribe now to join us on this adventure. As I walked, I kept looking over my shoulder, terrified. He would appear out of the darkness. The path twisted and turned and I felt like I was going in circles, just when I thought I couldn't go any further. I heard voices, familiar voices. I followed the sound and burst into a small clearing. There were my friends gathered around a fire, looking worried. They jumped up when they saw me, bombarding me with questions. I tried to explain what happened, but I was too shaken to make much sense. All I knew was we had to leave now. We quickly packed up our camp, not wanting to risk another encounter with the man. As we hiked out, I kept looking back, half expecting to see him watching us. The feeling of being hunted stayed with me long after we were safe back home. The experience haunted me. I couldn't shake. The image of his wild eyes and the feeling of being trapped in those woods, camping something I once loved, now filled me with dread. I still think about that night and wonder who he was and what would have happened if I hadn't escaped. I am grateful I got out, but the fear lingers. A reminder that sometimes the real danger is just a heartbeat away, hidden in the quiet places we least expect. Last summer I rented a cabin in the Adera for a week. I needed to get away from everything and the mountains seemed like the perfect place. The cabin was isolated, surrounded by trees and not too far from a small lake. It was exactly what I was looking for, peace and quiet. The first couple of days were great. I spent my time hiking, swimming in the lake and just relaxing on the porch with a book. I barely saw anyone else. It was like having my own private retreat. The cabin itself was cozy, with a small kitchen, a living room and a bedroom upstairs. On the third day I decided to do some cleaning. I was wiping down the living room. Not was something odd. There was a small hole in the bookshelf, just above eye level. I looked closer and saw a tiny lens. Inside it was a camera. My heart started pounding. I quickly checked the rest of the room, and found another one behind a picture frame on the wall. I felt sick. Someone had been watching me. I tried to stay calm and think I needed to check the rest of the cabin. I went upstairs to the bedroom and found another camera in the smoke detector. The bathroom had one too, hidden in the vent. There was even one in the kitchen inside a clock on the wall. I didn't know what to do. My phone had no signal and the nearest town was miles away. I thought about driving there, but my car was parked outside in plain view. Whoever was watching might see me leaving. I felt trapped. I decided to pack my things quietly, hoping to leave without drawing attention. As I was stuffing my clothes into my bag, I heard a knock at the door. My blood ran cold. I peeked out the window and saw the landlord standing on the porch. He was an older man, probably in his 60s, and he looked friendly enough when I first met him. But now, knowing he'd been spying on me, he seemed sinister. I didn't answer the door. I just stood there frozen, hoping he would go away. After a few minutes he knocked again, harder. This time, "Is everything all right in there?" he called out. His voice sounded concerned, but I didn't trust it. I stayed silent. Eventually he left, but I knew I couldn't stay. I cracked my bag and crept out the back door, staying low. I made my way through the trees, heading toward the main road. It was a long walk, but I hoped I could find a signal and call for help. As I walked, I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see the landlord following me. Every rustle in the bushes made me jump. The sun was setting and the woods were getting darker. I finally reached the road and started walking toward the town. It was another few miles, but I had no other choice. After about an hour I saw headlights coming up the road. I waved my arms, hoping it was someone who could help. The car slowed down and stopped. A middle-aged couple was inside. I told them what happened and they immediately called the police. They let me sit in their car while we waited for the officers to arrive. The police came and took my statement. They went back to the cabin with me and found the cameras. They arrested the landlord that night. It turned out he had been renting the cabin for years and had been spying on all his guests to her dozens of recordings on his computer. The whole experience left me shaken. I thought I was going to have a relaxing week in the mountains, but it turned into a nightmare. I still have trouble sleeping, thinking about those cameras and how he watched my every move. I never thought selling my old car on Craigslist would turn into the most terrifying experience of my life. I was just trying to make some extra cash to help pay off some bills. My old Honda Civic had served me well for years, but it was time to let it go. I posted an ad, added some pictures and waited for interested buyers to contact me. It didn't take long before I got a message from a guy named Jeff. He seemed really interested, asking all the right questions about the car. We exchanged a few emails and he asked if he could come by to take a look. Everything seemed normal. I agreed and gave him my address. Jeff showed up the next afternoon. He was in his late 30s, clean-shaven and wore a friendly smile. We made small talk as he inspected the car and everything felt fine. He seemed genuinely interested. Even asked to take it for a test drive. I didn't think twice and handed him the keys. He suggested we drive to a nearby parking lot to get a better feel for the car again. This didn't seem odd. I agreed and got in the passenger seat as we drove. He kept up the friendly chatter, asking about my job, my interests and other casual topics, but something about the way he was driving started to feel off. He wasn't driving like someone who was testing a car. He was driving with a purpose, like he knew exactly where he was going. We pulled into an abandoned lot on the outskirts of town. Mike had told me something was wrong, but before I could say anything, he stopped the car and turned to me with a different look in his eyes. The friendly demeanor was gone, repped by something cold and calculating. Get out. He said, his voice low and menacing. My heart raced as I realized I was trapped. I fumbled for the door handle, but he cracked my arm, yanking me back. You're not going anywhere, he hissed. I tried to scream, but he slapped his hand over my mouth, muffling the sound. Panic searched for me. I had to think fast. I bit down hard on his hand and he yelped in pain, loosening his grip just enough for me to push the door open and stumble out. I ran as fast as I could now, looking back. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out everything else. I could hear him cursing behind me, but I didn't stop. I sprinted toward the main road, praying that someone would be there to help. Miraculously, a car was approaching. I waved frantically and the driver, an older woman, stopped and rolled down her window. Help me, I screamed. Please help me. She must have seen the terror in my eyes because she unlocked the door without hesitation. I jumped in and she sped off, leaving Jeff standing in the dust. I explained what had happened between gasps for breath, and she took me straight to the nearest police station. The police took my statement and assured me they'd investigate. They took the details of Jeff's description and the messages we exchanged. They also promised to search the abandoned lot where he had taken me. Days passed and I couldn't shake the fear that GPT me every time I heard a car pull up outside my house. I panicked. The police eventually called me with an update. They found my car in the lot, but Jeff was nowhere to be found. They said he was like a serial carjacker, who had lured other unsuspecting sellers into similar traps. Knowing he was still out there haunted me. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything. I had nightmares of him finding me finishing what he started. The police promised to keep looking, but they admitted it would be difficult without more leads. I changed my phone number, moved to a new apartment and tried to get on with my life, but the fear stayed with me. Every time I went outside, I felt like someone was watching. I never sold anything on Craigslist again, and I warned everyone I knew to be careful. Eventually the police caught Jeff. He had tried to pull the same stunt on another victim, but this time they were ready for him. They arrested him and charged him with multiple counts of carjacking and attempted kidnapping. Hearing the news brought some relief, but the experience changed me. It was late and the rain was coming down in sheets. I could barely see the road through the windshield. My old car sputtered and stalled, the engine dying with a final pathetic cough. I tried turning the key, but it was no use. I was stranded in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific Northwest. I checked my phone, no signal, of course. I sat there for a moment trying to decide what to do. I couldn't stay in the car all night. I needed help. I noticed a faint light in the distance, barely visible through the trees and rain. It looked like a farmhouse. Crapping my jacket, I stepped out into the rain. It was cold and the water soaked through my shoes and clothes. In seconds I started walking towards the light, hoping someone there could help me. The walk felt longer than it should have. The mud sucked at my feet and the rain made it hard to see. Finally I reached the farmhouse. It was old and a bit run down, but the lights were on. I knocked on the door shivering. A man opened the door. He was tall and heavy-set, with a scruffy beard and a worn flannel shirt. He looked surprised to see me. My car broke down. I said, I need help. Can I use your phone? He stared at me for a moment, then nodded, come on in. You'll catch your death out there. I stepped inside, grateful for the warmth. The inside of the Owls was cluttered but cozy. There was a fire burning in the fireplace and the smell of something cooking filled the air. Sit by the fire. He said, I'll get my wife. She can help you. I sat down trying to stop shivering. A woman appeared from the kitchen. She was small and thin, with a kind face and grey hair pulled back in a bone. Hello. She said, I'm Martha, this is my husband, Tom. What brings you out here? On a night like this? I explained about my car breaking down and asked if I could use their phone. Martha smiled and shook her head. We don't have a phone. She said, but Tom can drive you to town in the morning. It's too dangerous to go out now. I felt a cling of her kn. Something about the situation didn't feel right, but I didn't have much choice. I was stuck here for the night. Thank you, I said, I appreciate it. Tom nodded and offered me some tea. I took it hoping it would warm me up. The rain pounded against the windows and the wind held outside. The storm was getting worse. As we sat there, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Tom kept glancing at me with a strange look in his eyes and Martha seemed overly friendly. I tried to relax, telling myself I was just being paranoid. They showed me to a small guest room upstairs. It was simple but clean. I thanked them again and closed the door. The bed was old and creaky, but I was too tired to care. I lay down hoping to get some sleep. A few hours later I woke up to a noise. It was faint, but it sounded like someone whispering. I listened, heart pounding. The whispers grew louder and I realized they were coming from the other side of the wall. I got out of bed and pressed my ear to the wall. I could hear Tom and Martha talking, but I couldn't make out what they were saying something about. The tone of their voices made my skin crawl. I heard footsteps coming up the stairs, panicking. I quickly got back into bed and pretended to be asleep. The door creaked open and I could feel someone standing there watching me. After what felt like an eternity, the door closed and the footsteps retreated. I knew I had to get out of there. Quietly I got up and dressed. I tiptoed to the door and opened it just enough to peek out. The hallway was empty. I slipped out of the room and headed for the stairs. I made it to the bottom without making a sound. The front door was just a few steps away. I reached for the handle, but before I could open it, a hand grabbed my shoulder. I spun around to see Tom. His face twisted with anger. "Where do you think you're going?" he hissed. "I need to leave." I stammered. "I don't feel well." "You're not going anywhere," he said, tightening his grip on my shoulder. "Martha, we have a problem." Martha appeared from the kitchen, a knife in her hand. She smiled, but it was no longer a kind smile. "We can't let you leave," she said. "Not now." I struggled trying to break free, but Tom was too strong. He shoved me into a chair and tied my hands behind my back with a rough rope. Martha stood nearby, the knife glinting in the firelight. "Please just let me go," I begged. "I won't tell anyone, I promise." Tom laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. "It's too late for that," he said. "You shouldn't have come here." They left me there tied to the chair while they went into another room. I could hear them talking, but the words were muffled. My mind raced, trying to come up with a plan. After what felt like hours, they came back. Tom untied me and forced me to stand. "You're coming with us," he said. "Don't try anything, or you'll regret it." They marched me outside into the rain. The storm was still reaching and the cold wind cut through me like a knife. They led me to a small shed behind the house. Tom opened the door and they shoved me inside. The shed was dark and smelled of damp earth. I could hear the rain pounding on the roof. Tom lit a lantern, casting a dim light over the room. There were tools and old farming equipment scattered around, but nothing I could use to defend myself. "Stay here," Tom said. "We'll be back in the morning." They left, locking the door behind them. I was alone in the dark, cold and scared. I had no idea what they planned to do with me, but I knew I had to escape. I spent the next few hours searching the SHF for anything that could help me. Finally I found a small rusty saw. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. I worked at the door trying to saw through the old wood. It took forever, but eventually I made a hole big enough to squeeze through. I slipped out into the night, the rain still pouring down. I ran, not caring about the mud in the cold. I just needed to get away. I didn't know where I was going, but I kept running until I saw the faint glow of headlights in the distance. It was a car coming down the road. I stumbled towards it, waving my arms, hoping they would stop. The car pulled over and a man got out. "Are you okay?" he asked, looking concerned. "No," I gasped. "Please help me there." "After me." He helped me into the car and drove me to the nearest town. I told the police everything, but when they went to the farmhouse, Tom and Martha were gone. The house was empty and there was no sign of them. I never found out what they were planning to do with me, and I never saw them again. I had always loved hiking alone in the Rockies. It was my escape from the noise and stress of the city. That weekend I decided to spend a few days in the back country, away from everything. The first day was perfect: clear skies, fresh air, and the kind of peace you only find in nature. I set up my camp near a small stream as the sun started to set. As I was cooking my dinner, I felt a strange sensation, like I was being watched. I looked around but didn't see anyone. I told myself it was just my imagination and tried to shake off the feeling, but it wouldn't go away. Every rustle of the leaves, every snap of a twig, made my heart jump. After dinner, I decided to explore the area a bit before it got too dark. That's when I saw him, a man standing far off in the distance, half hidden behind some trees. He was just standing there, not moving. I waved, trying to be friendly, but he didn't respond. He just stood there staring at me. I felt a chill run down my spine. I quickly returned to my camp, my mind racing. Who was he? Why was he just standing there? I tried to convince myself he was another hiker. Maybe just curious or lost. But deep down I felt something was wrong. As night fell, I kept looking over my shoulder, expecting to see him again. I decided to stay awake for a while, just to be safe. I kept my flashlight and a knife close by. Hours passed and I didn't see or hear anything unusual. I started to think maybe he had left. I finally fell asleep, but it was a restless sleep. I woke up several times, my heart pounding. Sure, I had heard something each time. It was nothing, just a wind or an animal moving through the brush, but around 3:00 a.m. I woke up to a distinct sound: footsteps, slow, deliberate footsteps coming towards my tent. I held my breath, clutching my knife tightly. The footsteps stopped right outside my tent. I could see the shadow of a person standing there. My heart was pounding so hard. I thought it would burst out of my chest. I didn't move, didn't make a sound. The shadow stayed there for what felt like an eternity, then slowly moved away. I didn't sleep at all after that. As soon as the first light of dawn broke, I packed up my camp as quickly and quietly as I could. I decided to cut my trip short and head back to my car. The trail back was long and difficult, but I didn't care. I just wanted to get out of there. As I hipped, I kept looking back, half expecting to see him following me. At first there was nothing, just the trees in the silence of the forest, but after about an hour I saw him again, far off, but closer than before. He was following me, keeping his distance, but always there. Panic set in. I quickened my pace, almost running at times, but the trail was rough and I had to be careful not to twist an ankle or fall every time I looked back. He was there, closer. Each time I started to think about what I would do if he caught up to me. The trailhead was still miles away, and I was getting tired. My mind was racing with fear and adrenaline. I needed a plan. I remembered a fork in the trail up ahead. One path was longer but easier. The other shorter but steeper. I decided to take the steep path, hoping it would slow him down or make him give up. When I reached the fork, I took the steep path and practically ran down the trail. It was risky, one wrong step and I could seriously hurt myself, but I didn't have a choice. I kept going, my legs burning ls on fire. I didn't dare look back. I just focused on putting as much distance between us as possible. Finally, I reached the bottom of the trail where it leveled out. I looked back and saw nothing, no sign of him. I allowed myself to breathe a little easier, but I didn't stop. I kept moving, determined to get to my car. When I finally reached the trailhead, I was exhausted but relieved. I didn't see anyone around. My car was the only one in the parking lot. I quickly got in, locked the doors and started the engine. As I drove away, I kept checking the rearview mirror, expecting to see him standing there watching me leave, but there was no one. I didn't stop driving until I was far away from the mountains, back in the safety of the city. It's been weeks since that hike and I still think about it every day. I don't know who he was or what he wanted, but I'm thankful I got away. It was one of those stormy nights where the rain pounded relentlessly against the windshield, making it hard to see anything beyond a few feet ahead. I was on a rural delivery route, trying to navigate my way through winding back roads that seemed to stretch on forever. As the storm intensified, I realized that I had taken a long turn somewhere along the way. Panic began to rise within me as I struggled to find my bearings in the darkness. With each passing minute, the road seemed to grow more desolate, with no signs of civilization in sight. Feeling a sense of urgency, I decided to pull over and ask for directions from the next person I saw. Just as I was about to give up hope, I spotted a figure up ahead, huddled under the shelter of a dilapidated bus stop. Relief flooded through me as I approached the stranger, eager for any assistance they could offer. But as I got closer, a feeling of unease began to gnaw at the pit of my stomach. There was something off about the person standing before me, something that sent shivers down my spine. Nevertheless, I pushed aside my instincts and greeted them with a friendly smile, explaining my predicament and asking for directions back to the main road. To my surprise, the person responded with a smile of their own, offering to help me find my way. Grateful for their kindness, I followed their directions, without question, eager to escape the isolation of the back roads and return to the safety of civilization. But as we drove deeper into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The roads grew narrower and more treacherous, with towering trees looming overhead like silent sentinels. I began to suspect that the person beside me wasn't leading me back to safety at all, but further into the heart of darkness. Suddenly my worst fears were realized, as the person directed me down a secluded dirt path, far removed from any semblance of civilization. Street alarm bells rang in my mind as I realized that I had fallen into a trap lured away from safety by someone with sinister intentions. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I slammed on the brakes and demanded answers from the person beside me, but instead of responding, they simply smiled, their eyes glinting with malice, as they reached for something hidden beneath their jacket. Terrified for my life, I knew that I had to act fast if I wanted to escape. With a surge of determination, I flung open the car door and bolted into the darkness. The sound of my pounding footsteps, drowned out by the roar of the storm branches, whipped in my face as I ran, my heart pounding in my chest. As I struggled to put as much distance between myself and my would-be assailant as possible, I didn't stop running until I was sure that I was safe, far away from the danger that lurked in the shadows. Exhausted and trembling, I collapsed onto the ground, the rain soaking through my clothes as I tried to catch my breath. But even as I lay there gasping for air, I knew that I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death, as the storm raged on overhead. I vowed to never again trust a stranger in the darkness, to always listen to my instincts, and never let fear cloud my judgment. And as I finally made my way back to the main road, I couldn't help but wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been so lucky. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and share the excitement.